me how you got started in the concert business, Dan. Everybody wants to know how people get started. How did you get started?
You know, it's funny, my parents took me to see Tony Orlando at the old Turn of the Century in Denver when I was a kid. I was young, I was like 7 or 8. And I left, I was so excited. I was like, I want to do that. They're like, you want to be a singer? I'm like, no, I'm going to be the guy in that back room counting the money. That guy's got the job. Yeah. And never really lost it. I always wanted to be a concert promoter. And in Denver, Barry Fay was the big major in Denver.
You're from Denver originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Denver. And Barry was, next to John Elway, the biggest celebrity in the market, above the news anchors, above the car dealer guys that did the commercials. Everyone knew Barry Fay's name.
Yeah, Barry
and,
was,
you know, so it was a bigger deal because they announced the Summer of Stars. People would line up for the paper of the summer season at Red Rocks. It was a big deal. He was always on the news, nationally and locally. It seemed very exciting.
It's funny, back in, you know, we'll reminisce a little bit. I'll reminisce a bit. You're too young. Back in the old days, there were big promoters in every single market. Bill Graham had San Francisco. Avalon kind of dominated down in L.A.
The majors.
The major markets, yeah. You had Louis Messina down in Texas. And Barry Fay was the man up in Colorado by far and away. There's, you know, you didn't, it was funny, a lot of guys start in the concert business when they're back in college, right? And they go and spend the university's money. You actually started when you were back in high school, and I don't suspect you were spending the high school's budget. Talk about that, Dan.
Well, it was really hard. There weren't a lot of all-age clubs, and I was in a band. So we would rent the 1,000-seater in our market and put up all the money and get the big local bands that were playing the 21 and over clubs that were opening up for the really cool bigger bands to headline. And then we'd pack in a room, and the local bands that were headlining those shows were loving it because they were selling merch to kids. Because people don't tend to buy shows at the 21 and over clubs. They buy booze. And then they leave. And maybe they'll get the song later, but the kids will buy the CDs. The younger kids spend money on T-shirts and CDs, and the bands loved it. So I had more acts wanting to do shows, and I didn't want to overplay. So I started promoting more shows without us. Turned out I was a much better promoter than I was a drummer.
Okay, now let me ask you this. Who gave you the money to promote these shows? First concert I ever promoted, I got one of my buddy's dads, who was a golfer, to spot me. I lost every frickin' dime. Where did you get the money for this? And how many people did you disappoint along the way, Dan?
Well, I used a lot of bar mitzvah bonds, and, you know, I had one of those shows where I lost more money than I thought I could. You know, my dad bailed me out, and I'm still paying him back $5 a week. But my parents were really supportive, so it was good. But, you know, I was working at Subway and using that money and finally starting to make enough money that I didn't have to go to work after school, so.
Unbelievable.
Okay.
Your parents in Subway, who knew, right? You're in high school, you went to college, obviously. Did you book concerts in college?
I did a little bit as
part of the committee?
I never got on concert board. I went to the University of Northern Colorado for a little while, and it was too quick, too fast. I went back and did shows for a while. Worked with Doug Kaufman at Nobody in Particular for a little while, and then started to do my own thing at the Mercury Cafe in Denver, which is a 500-seater. I started doing like 150 shows a year, moved into a 1,000-seater. And then, you know, with the help of Andy Summers at the agency group, I started to expand into other markets.
Okay. Now, one of the more traditional route would be, you know, is that, you know, you do a few shows on your own, you attract the attention of the Barry Fays and the Don Strasbergs and stuff. You must have gotten on their radar somewhere along the line, but you chose to keep doing it on your own. Why?
Well, you know, it always seemed like those guys want to pay you so much less than you're making. And when you start doing shows and the bands start breaking, it's like insurance, you know? It's like the first couple of years suck, but once you start to get those clients and they're just sending in the money, once you start breaking a couple bands, life gets easier. And the longer you do it, the more bigger bands you have, the more money you're making. Everybody wants to pay you a penny of what you're making. It's just like, it's hard to do that.